games of the regular season. Those keys from Bob are brought to you by Tennessee Highway Safety Office. Designate before you celebrate, because fans don't let fans drive drunk. All right, Bob, we didn't know if we'd be here tonight, but here we go. We've tipped it off. All 8 teams are ready to go, and 1 versus 8 to get us going.
And I like the 2-7 game we've got a little later on as well.
Now let's see if SIUE can hang with Belmont tonight. That's a good start with a bucket from Lamar Wright. 2 regular season meetings between Belmont and SIUE, and Belmont won handedly in each of them. And Belmont right back at you with the lay-in from Caleb Hollander.
Now the combination of Hollander and Muzinski underneath, very impressive, and will pose problems for most any team in America.
Get a look at the starting lineups brought to you by Jostens. Jostens, the official recognition company of the OVC. Hollander had the bucket for Belmont down the other end, and he just picked up the foul. He's the starting 4-man in that starting lineup for Casey Alexander and the Belmont Bruins. And that sends Shamar Wright to the free throw line.
Wright's a big, tall, rangy type player. 2, 3, he can play at the 4 as well. And again, you take a look at those numbers, 9.0, 4.6. That's very consistent with what you'll see when you look up and down this SIUE roster, and they're going to need every bit of that tonight.
Well, that's got to feel good for him to get a couple early ones against Belmont. The Bruins held him scoreless the last time they played in early February. Well, there's the first look at Muzinski, and SIUE all over the floor, but that ball's out of bounds. Staying on this end is Mike Adewumi, your player to watch at Hustle.
Yeah, particularly the first time these two played in Nashville. The game just got out of hand early, and that's what I'm talking about in the keys to watch, the balanced scoring. Everybody's got to contribute tonight for SIUE. Let's make this a 35, 38-minute game and see what happens beyond that.
Well, Muzinski's getting that ankle tested a couple times here early on as SIUE goes coast to coast. And it's Courtney Carter with his first basket.
Talking to Brian Baroni, he feels like they can pressure the basketball against this Belmont team. What they don't want to do is maybe get into a half-court game of sorts and let the bigs take over underneath.
3 goes down from Luke Smith, and that's a good sign for Bruins fans. He came in cold the last couple weeks.
Oh, he did. And, you just go through ebb and flows throughout the season, and Luke Smith being one of those examples there. And he's just been such a big part of this Belmont team.
Ooh, block in transition from Adewumi. Not only a good scorer and rebounder, but he can pin you against the glass like he just did.
Going to need every bit of that tonight, and you'll hear me say that time and time again, almost to the point it's like, wow, but watch this. High elevation here, pins it right against the glass.
Ben Shepard thought he could just coast in there, and Adewumi said nope. So second trip to the free throw line already for Shamar Wright. And you look at what Wright's done since Belmont held him scoreless. He's been on a tear, Bob.
Well, he's taken it to another level of sorts inside of this program. And keep in mind, this is an SIUE team that has had a major pause in their season. And so, different coaches have had different takes, but I promise you there's nothing in anyone's playbook other than go out and play hard like Wright has been doing and come around and see if you can contribute.
We got to keep Caleb Hollander off the offensive glass.
Hollander, Muzinski, oh my, if you're SIUE.
Well, good start for Mike Adewumi, and some life here for the Cougars in the first 3 minutes.
I like that approach, and just being able to keep the bigs for Belmont off of the boards and just out of being around the basket. There's a good steal there, and probably a pretty bad decision in the interior pass by Murphy.
Well, you said it, SIUE, really nothing to lose. You crushed in a couple of games in the regular season against Belmont. They're going to mix and match their defenses tonight, throw you a little zone in there that we've seen already.
And they're going to probably want to go pretty deep at the shot clock as this possession's kind of brought out.
Courtney Carter can't hit. Hollander the rebound for the Bruins. Typically one of the fastest playing teams in the country. You see some of the pace here, but Hollander's 3 is off and back down to the Cougars.
Exactly why you want to keep it low in the clock. Also, SIUE is not, we talked about their turnover penchant, but also they're not outscoring your opponents a lot. Their margin is very slim. It's around 2 points per game. And, of course, that's an adjusted as you get a good look at Brian Baroni there. What a great basketball family he comes from. And, second season, and you throw the pandemic in. And, again, everybody's got their own story, Connor, but Brian Baroni has really pulled this team up from the depths of a really bad team of seasons past, quite frankly.
Yeah, you know how hard it is to be a coach's wife normally. He said he gives great credit to his wife and kids because the stress is always high as a college coach, but they've given him his space this year more than most years as Hollander scores for Belmont again.
Just a great person to visit with. Casey Alexander, the same for Belmont, and I have a chance just kind of develop a relationship with him throughout the season, and it's just great to see the approach that it's been and the different ways that all of these teams have kind of handled the pandemic this season.
Well, Belmont had their share of issues in the preseason. They had about a month and a half there where it was hard for them to practice, but they came out hot, and they've got a lead. Caleb Hollander pours one in from three.
And Hollander has been outstanding all season long. Perhaps a little bit underrated, if you will, in terms of that outside shooting. You got the big guy coming out and making those shots on the outside. It obviously stretches your defense. The athleticism of SIUE, they hope that wins the favor tonight and wins over because handling Muzinski and Hollander, tough.
You got so much length outside of Grayson Murphy, who's the two-time Defensive Player of the Year as of yesterday in the OVC. And it's Murphy getting up the shot. And that's out to SIUE when we come back. Well, quite a start for Caleb Hollander. He just gave the Bruins their first lead.
Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and
Bruins just took their first lead over SIUE. There's their second-year head coach, Casey Alexander. Before that, 6 years at Lipscomb, but he, of course, is one of Belmont's own, an alum of the program, and spent years on Rick Byrd's staff.
A columnist in Nashville asked Rick Byrd in an interview a couple of weeks ago, said, what would you tell Casey to do any differently? And he said, are you kidding me? If I were to get involved in it, I might mess it up. And so I thought that just spoke volumes about the job Casey Alexander has done in Nashville. And it took a lot to get him to become across town. I say across town, about 5 blocks difference between Lipscomb and Belmont.
Right, and obviously following in one of his mentors' steps too. That's not easy to do on top of leading your alma mater.
Well, hats off to him because very few can do that. over time. It's just been proven for whatever the circumstances are, it just hadn't worked in a lot of cases.
He was not super thrilled with how his team played in the last couple of games without Nick Muszynski. Belmont comes in 24-3, but 2 of those losses back-to-back coming into this tournament. So you see Adewumi flying high again for a block.
And I'm going to quote Mark Twain and say the concern about Belmont is a little understated, right? Their demise. Don't worry about that 2-game sweep at Moorhead and at Eastern Kentucky. There are a number of reasons, and it wasn't simply because of Nick Muszynski being out, Connor. There were a lot of other elements of the game that kind of tailed off in those first 18 games of which Belmont won easily inside this conference.
It took you 5 minutes to get poetic on us.
Well,
drop Mark Twain in the first 5 minutes of the tournament. I knew I missed you.
It's been a long day. Likewise. Look at this guy.
Adewumi puts SIUE back in front, and the Cougars look really strong against the top seed here in the first couple minutes.
Ended a big scoring drought by SIUE, and that's something that's really hard to overcome if you're SIUE that type of size. And then when you get Evan Bronze in there mixing it up at 6'9".
Bronze is a guy that basically had the same role without Muszynski in there the last 2 games, but did have one of his better games with Muszynski out against Eastern Kentucky. You said it, Bob. SIUE might take some air out of the ball tonight. Play late in the clock. They are here, and they turned it over as Carter went cross court to Adewumi.
Yeah, they got the pressure on the ball, but the pass, you see Adewumi there scoring later, and then there's just not much you can do about that when you're able to see Evan Bronze and see where that ball's coming back out. Go right back up with it. Never put it on the floor.
After the Bronze bucket, he comes out of the game. Muszynski's back in there. It'll be interested to see how much Muszynski plays tonight. Obviously, it's win or go home, but coming off 2 games where he didn't play with an ankle injury.
Well, immediately when he comes into the game, they go right to him in the mid-post. That's his first team first. We'll be tracking that for sure tonight. So what is the over-under on that for Muszynski? Connor, what do you think?
I don't know. Ask Vegas.
Come on now.
I don't make the book. The thought was, because it was a wide margin in the first game, that maybe there'd be a chance to play him low minutes tonight, but not with the way that SIUE's playing.
Again, they're trying to match SIUE, their athleticism, going deep in the clock, and just kind of slow the tempo down, trying to offset some deficiencies that they have.
On the late clock again, Desmond Polk on the take, and he's got the tall task tonight of going against Grayson Murphy a lot of the time. Told you he's the reigning defensive player of the year, was named the defensive player of the year for the 2nd time in a row yesterday. Jacoby Wood, talented freshman. That ball popping around for Belmont. They got Hollander an open look. And saved by James. And there's some life in the legs right now for SIUE.
I like their energy coming out. And again, they did not flinch when you saw the low post Muszynski and you saw coming high Hollander. They didn't flinch about that. They went ahead and stayed in their assignments. And that's just about all you could do with that size on the outside and on the inside.
Think about it. Not only the long pause leading to a bunch of games in a short amount of time for SIUE, but they also have dealt with personnel losses all season long, as Hollander sticks one back off of the miss from Murphy.
Hollander with an early 11 and is just lighting it up right now for Belmont. Getting great looks, great shots, and again, just challenges ahead for SIUE.
You get a look, he's outscoring the rest of the team, almost outscoring SIUE with his 11. That miss from Adewumi is cleared out of there by Murphy.
Way too early the shot clock, Connor. They can get better than that. This guy you got to find in transition.
Hollander finally missed one, but then James was out of bounds. Hollander's having one of those nights, came in hot. He stayed hot.
Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender, because we wouldn't take the... You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender, because we wouldn't take the... You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender, because we wouldn't take the... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender, because we wouldn't take the... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender, because we wouldn't take the... You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender, because we wouldn't take the...
UFC 259, buy it on ESPNplus.com/PPV.
Our tournament series history is presented by the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. Partner with us to protect Kentucky's wildlife heritage. Connor Onion, Bob Belvin back with you. And the history between these two teams in the OVC tournament, well, non-existent. So we're writing it tonight. How about that?
Yeah, we'll take that any night. In fact, if you look at SIUE, you think you mentioned in the open, they had a possibility to move to that 7 line tonight. So because they were unable to do that and are the 8th seed, that's how we're able to make history. It's just kind of how that works out in the most unique kind of way. Connor's looking at me like,
it's a pleasure to make history with you, Bob.
Well,
it always is.
Get set. We got 3 more of these. Adawame's been playing extremely well, Connor. And, you know, you look at his minutes per game, averaging 30-plus. They may need 36-plus out of him tonight.
Yeah, got to. Carlos Curtis is out. Cam Williams tore his ACL. You've had Philip Pebble transfer. Sid Wilson hasn't played since January 30th. As Luke Smith hits his second 3. He's trying to join Hollander.
Now, Luke Smith, one of those rare transfers from the University of South onto this Belmont team, a 7-0 run. And there was a point in time when Luke Smith was their go-to guy kind of early in the season. And there are a lot, as you might imagine, a lot of interchangeable parts in that Belmont team. To your point about SIUE, they do have a lot coming back next season that they're very excited about, coming off of injury.
Oh, good find. Smith finds Murphy. And Brian Baroni needs a timeout on the SIUE sideline. It's a 9-0 run for Belmont now.
James got loose on the shift off underneath defensively and left Murphy wide open inside the lane.
Belmont always moving. We told you about their great pace.
Watch this right here. Here's the big 3 by Smith just a moment ago. They didn't get the defensive switch off they needed then. And you can see the defensive misalignment then. James comes over to the block. Left the underneath wide open. This is just too good of a passing team, Connor. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about one of the elite passing teams in the nation when you look at Casey Alexander and Belmont. So your defensive marks and being on them and knowing when to change off, when to fight through the screens, when to take the screen, when to go to the ball, when to go to the basket, all of those things are just important elements when you play a team that passes the ball so well.
Well, and it's amazing, too. Casey Alexander, the Belmont head coach, brought it up that in half of their games this year, they've been without at least one starter. So to be able to share the ball the way they have when they haven't had the regulars out there all the time is that much more remarkable.
You know, when things are just kind of woven in your DNA and you find those kind of key players to fill those roles, that's exactly what you get when you come to that. So, yeah, there's a lot of interchangeable parts, as I mentioned. But the passing game and the over pursuit on the defensive end, like you just saw Murphy, kind of pull off and let that ball deflect off SIUE. Those are the kinds of things that are just kind of woven into Belmont's DNA, and it's just kind of expected of you.
Well, yeah, usually you think of a defensive intimidator being a shot blocker, but Murphy, with what we saw him do right there, defensive intimidator at a guard spot. Miss down to bronze, and SIUE can't clear it out. A third chance coming with Ben Shepard. And he gets it pounded out of his hands. Three from right is off. And the Cougars were sniffing out a second chance. Belmont says no. And that one knocked out by James. And Belmont has it on the baseline.
Yeah, James getting there defensively. That had the look of an alley-oop of sorts. Belmont actually had two players right underneath the basket right there. Kind of gummed things up a bit.
How about that block by Lamar Wright?
Into the floor, and then turned it around into points. Got Abawunde where they wanted to underneath, but he had to pass it out to the wing, and then things didn't go well for SIU at that point.
Murphy is choosy when he shoots. Had an open look there and made an extra pass. SIUE forces the turnover. James inside. He does a lot of his work outside.
Too early in the clock, Connor. They've gotten away, has SIUE, from what we talked about in terms of really needing to run some clock.
An offensive foul on Belmont as Muzinski cleared out. And, I mean, you said it, use some clock, but SIUE right now, they've gone into about a 5-minute drought here. They're trying to find a bucket any way they can.
Yeah, and I think that may also include trying to get to the free throw line here. And be real careful with 8.5 to play here in the first to keep this under 10.
Well, here you go. Here's what you're talking about. Use a little bit more clock. Seeing the passing around the perimeter, and SIUE was good in this situation to open the game, and finally they break that seal on the back pass to Wright.
Talk about beat Belmont at their own game in that possession. That's exactly what happened right then for the score.
Okay, that basket for Belmont has the special meaning of where the game winner was scored by Tyler Scanlon last year to clinch the championship. So kind of a double beating them at their own game there. Backdoor cut for a layup down that way. Wood got hit. James got him on the hip. So the Cougars finally broke that seal on the 5-minute scoring drought, and they're within 6 of the top seed in the first half.
Your top salesman is working from home while working to close a deal. But his Uncle Larry decided to stop by 2 weeks ago. This looks like a job for Smile Power. Good thing your employees have dental insurance backed nationally by over 65 years of motor defending experience. So their healthy deal closers are always ready to close. Unleash your Smile Power with Delta Dental of Tennessee. Talk to your employer or visit coveryourmouth.com today to learn more.
Visit Evansville, Indiana, where E is for everyone. Ideal for a weekend getaway, family reunion, group tour, concert or sporting event, small business meeting, or a large convention. Evansville has a fun, friendly environment with all the amenities of a big city. Exciting events, festivals, and attractions all year long. A thriving downtown with new hotels, nightlife, fabulous restaurants, and entertainment. We're conveniently located in the heart of the Midwest with all the charm you could ever hope for. Yes, Hoosier hospitality is alive and well. Come visit Evansville and you will see E is for everyone.
Hello, I'm Chad Miles, host of Kentucky Afield, the longest-running outdoor show in the nation. I've had the privilege of watching Kentucky's elk herd grow to the largest east of the Mississippi, attaining Boone and Crockett status, and I've shared in some amazing elk hunts along the way. This year, nearly 600 tags are available to the public, and you can take your pick of tags to put in for and possibly go on the hunt of a lifetime. Simply apply by April 30th for your chance to hunt elk right here in Kentucky.
Let's take a look at the tournament bracket presented by Graduate Nashville Hotel. When you're in Nashville for a big game, Graduate Nashville is the smartest place to stay. And we lead it off with the top seed Belmont and SIUE tonight. Later tonight, it's the best defensive team in the conference, Morehead State, against a surging SEMO team that's won 4 of 5.
Yeah, they've played extremely well in Brad Korn's first season in Cape Girardeau. I saw them back in mid-January, and not so much to your point, Connor, but I'm looking very forward to seeing them in about 2 hours.
Yeah, that could be a tight game with how SEMO's playing. An overtime win against Austin P has triggered their late run in the season.
Coach of the Year, Preston Spradlin.
Yep. Well, Jacoby Wood is the reigning Mr. Basketball in Tennessee, and he's got a bucket here in his first OVC tournament.
Now, one of the things you get to see when you call a lot of these games is you see him play at the high school level, Wood, and he was outstanding doing that very thing at the high school level.
Oh, pretty move there from James. We told you he's a lethal outside shooter, but strong going to the basket there. Isaiah James, the transfer out of Indian Hills Community College.
A lot of transfers on this SIUE team, and they just strip Buzinski here.
Seen both Shamar and Lamar Wright, the twins. One with the big block. It was Shamar that time with the steal. Mike Adewumi's the top scorer for this SIUE team, and there is one of the Wrights. Lamar travels.
Lamar was just blown away by how he got the ball so deep in the post, Connor, and then felt like he had to dribble and move out to get a better angle to shoot the basketball in that case, and in step traveled. That's a bad turnover for SIUE. They had a great chance.
Well, can't leave that guy. Nick Muzinski had a wide open lane. That should never happen.
Boy, you could immediately see the coaching staff for SIUE come off their seats and realize what had happened with the help side defense. It wasn't there. It shifted incorrectly. That's why Buzinski's wide open.
First shot of the game coming off an ankle injury. Good for Bruins fans to see that it's a dunk. He's still got his spring.
Pretty high percentage stat we've seen from Moose. You know, watch the defense overreact. How do you miss 33? Went to the corner to try and defend a three-point shot, and that's about as high percentage of a shot as you'll ever see from Big 33.
Well, Muzinski, you said it, the story, it seems like every single year that he's played, he's now a third-year player, every year that we come to Evansville, we're talking about Nick Muzinski's ankle.
Yeah. Going to be the case this season as well. He goes back to the bench, so we never got a clear indication from you what you thought the over-under would be on the minutes played for Moose.
I'm going with 18 tonight.
I was going to be in the 15 to 20 range, so I think we're pretty much in agreement with that.
Okay, we'll get your bookie on the line at halftime and see what he says. Second chance again for Belmont. They're starting to scrap down there on the offensive side for second chances, and Caleb Hollander is white hot to begin this tournament. 14 first half points.
History should be your help, and in that case, James just didn't come out to Hollander beyond the three-point line. I genuinely think he didn't think he was going to take that shot from there.
A slide inside, and an easy two there for Michael Mattis. His first action of the night. It's a piece that SIUE's relied on late in the year with their personnel issues with injuries. And now James lost it, gives it up to Wright, and two in a row down tight for SIUE.
Again, a little more athleticism on the floor, and for SIUE, they're taking defense and creating it. A couple of miscues, bad passes, And again, Hollander, their inability to guard him on the outside kind of surprises me. You've got to respect what he can do there.
Especially after what you've seen the first couple of minutes. It's not like he was quiet the first time that SIUE saw him. Had 12 points in a 40-point win for the Belmont Bruins first time they played. Well, there's Isaiah James. Doesn't shoot a lot from out there, but he's a marksman.
Had a great game here all of a sudden. We see James on the inside, on the outside right then. Again, how often have we talked about defensive miscues, but by both of these teams. And the athleticism, as we undergo this 7-2 run by SIUE, the athleticism of the Cougars seems to really be taking over in spurts. It can't be consistent, and you wonder overall if it can be. But James underneath with a drive, James with a three, James with pretty good defense, but a pretty good complement to this team.
Yeah, SIUE finally has fresh legs. They've been playing like every other day since they came out of the COVID pause. So we've seen them be fresh tonight in the beginning of this game. Murphy saved it, numbers, and Belmont converts with Ben Shepard.
Just your classic head fake there by Shepard to get the defender up and going. And again, look how quickly, in fact, both of these teams, in particular Belmont, look how quickly they get the ball into the front court.
But then if you're SIUE, it's get it in there quick, but then hang on to it for a while and shrink the possessions in this game. And Isaiah James has the outside and the inside game working tonight.
I really like how he's playing, and he's matching the energy, he's matching the athleticism that he's up against on both ends of the floor.
James has 7 first-half points, and each of the 2 he scored inside the arc looks exactly like the one he just scored, and right back at you with Jacoby Wood from 3.
So hard to defend. You're almost out of words right then because, and you got to make sure if you're SIUE, you're not deflated, Connor, because you're playing extremely hard, going after it, overplaying the passing lanes, particularly when Belmont throws it across the court, and then you get a 3 like that. It kind of deflates you, and you just cannot have that happen if you're SIUE.
Well, Ben Shepard did it in transition, and now from deep. The defense is always there for Ben Shepard. The scoring has come in flashes for the sophomore out of Atlanta.
Well, wanting to get in transition yet again, going down the floor. This is, in my opinion, the recipe for SIUE. They've got to slow it down. And they got their doors blown off in Nashville and the same in Edwardsville as well. And got to be real careful not to let that happen again here early.
Well, that was an inadvertent pass off the deflection. Got it to Desmond Polk. And SIUE within 9 with 1.5 minutes to go until the half. And Grayson Murphy with a quick strike for Belmont.
Love bringing Hollander out on the wing and making that pass to the interior. And you love it when your big guys can make those kinds of passes.
You can see it, SIUE, hands on knees, little gassed here from Belmont's fast pace. Need more of this from Isaiah James.
You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the... You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and...
It's NBA on ABC time. Mavs, Nets, Clippers, Bucks on ABC.
Time and time again, we've talked about Belmont having a lot of weapons, but take a look defensively at SIUE. Everybody's on the outside, and then they run right up the middle with Grayson Murphy for an easy bucket. You can't get caught watching the paint dry, as the old saying goes, particularly here in Indiana, right? We're going to use that here. But that time, just too much spacing, too high defensively for SIUE, and that's been just one example. A couple of times they left Muzinski wide open. And you can see, back to your point, Connor, you can see that James in particular, a little gassed there on the bench.
Yeah, before they got to the bench, before that timeout, he already had hands on knees on the court. And with the way SIUE plays in the half court, they're running all over the place, and they're shorthanded.
Quite the combination for defeat if you're SIUE, and you just got to hang on. A 12-point margin here could be troublesome as you finish up the first half. You need to get the classic under 10 points.
Yeah, about 8 minutes into the half, they had a lead in this game. Belmont had made a run to get a lead, and then SIUE had struck back. So to your point, get it under 10 before halftime. Mike Adewumi helps that case.
Love the play drawn up out of the timeout.
Well, 3 again from Jacoby Wood, and he's starting to feel good after he was held down the final couple games of the regular season.
And Wood has hit shots from that exact spot right in front of the SIUE bench, and again, making sure you don't over-pursue and come out and defend that 3 if you're SIUE.
Well, that's the hot spot where you can turn around and say something to the other team's bench, right? That's where you want to be hitting your threes.
There's been a lot of folks that have been able to do that this season with so few fans, and even us broadcasters have heard a lot of things probably we thought were going on but really didn't happen. But when you're that close, yeah, you're going to talk it up a little bit, and why not?
Final shot of the half for the Belmont Bruins, the top seed in this tournament. Well, got to get one up. They didn't see the clock, apparently, and they held for too long. They're not used to playing slow. So no shot. Casey Alexander was hot on the Belmont sideline, but the Bruins do lead by 13.
And a hold up here before we leave the floor. For SIUE, they've played about as hard as they can play, but you got to duplicate that in the second half. And obviously, you're not in a great spot finding yourself down 13. At points in time, Casey Alexander's team was rock solid. Inside, outside, their big guys hitting threes. It looked to be vintage Belmont here in the We saw him very winded at the end of the first half. This is a classic case of first 5 minutes are real important for SIUE to hang on here.
Yeah, let's see if they got their legs back. You said it. I mean, 8 minutes left in the half. Isaiah James was hands on knees, and SIUE running around all over the floor in this zone. And they get a good start. That zone forces a turnover. So balanced scoring for the Cougars in the first half. Wright, Adewumi, and James had 8, 7, and 7 apiece. And they went to Courtney Carter to begin the second half, and Belmont gets their stop.
And they get the deflection, and that's something size and athleticism will afford you on the defensive end, is that kind of batted balls, loose balls that you create defensively. That's a spot. Notice the difference in the defense here in the second half on Hollander. They're coming out at the top of the arc. And they're doubling Muzinski down low, making him work for it a little bit. You know, he got a lot of good looks in the low post, seemingly without opposition in the first half.
That's a crushing foul for SIUE. They had Belmont bottled up. 5 on the clock, and then out of the inbounds, Grayson Murphy gets a layup.
Just hit rewind on this one. Have you seen this before from Belmont, particularly on an inbounds play?
Never. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. Remind me.
Well, I was quoting history, you know, quite a bit in the first half. You can see another key turnover here for SIUE. And, yeah, we've seen it on the inbounds. We've seen it on side outs. One of the things that Belmont didn't get a lot of success in the first half was those transition buckets. They had a couple spurts there where they got an easy three where they penetrated, dished it back out. And if this guy heats up again here in the second half, it will be lights out for SIUE.
Well, you got to think they talked in the SIUE locker room about closing out on Caleb Hollander. He's now got 17 points in the game.
And the message didn't resonate quite a bit there, at least in that last possession.
Adewumi on the attack, and he gets bumped, and he'll go to the line for a chance at three.
Yeah, this senior will not go out quietly tonight, and kind of starting second half as he did the first. This is pure penetration here, and the finish with the right hand up and under.
Do you remember that game a couple years ago in the NCAA tournament, second round game? It was Michigan against Houston. Jordan Poole hit the shot to win it for Michigan. Adewumi was on that Houston team, playing for Calvin Sampson back then. Transferred after that NCAA tournament run to McLennan Community College, now year 2 with SIUE.
Well, as I mentioned in the first half, there are a lot of transfers, and Brian Baroni's kind of built this year's team on a lot of transfers, and the way recruiting has changed so far, now Murphy just doing it all.
Well, the defensive player of the year scored, had the steal, but not an assist. Hollander missed it.
I think he'll get another one as we go on. You can see how recruiting has been changed during this pandemic as well. And now you see just a lot of transfers on this SIUE roster.
Well, trying to get old fast, as many mid-major programs have. Brian Baroni's in his second year on the SIUE side as the head coach. And that foul will go on Shamar Wright. I mean, you brought up Coach Baroni's background with his dad, Tony, being in the NBA with the Memphis Grizzlies. He spent some time at Texas A&M, was the head coach at Creighton. You get the feeling that, 3-4 years down the road, they're going to be back here in Evansville contending for this thing.
Well, I think he's just built the foundation. And one of the things I personally happy about is he kept Charles Bubba Wells on the bench. And remember, Baroni was a holdover from the previous administration, if you will. And that was a big risk by the SIUE faculty and president as well to make that decision to bring him and elevate Baroni. But it just seemed, when you watch him as an assistant coach, Connor, it just seemed like this guy's got the chops, he's got the DNA, he's going to be their guy if you give him time.
Well, 10 to shoot here for the Cougars. James off a ball fake. Little two-man game with Adewumi. And that's an offensive foul. It was Luke Smith stepping in on the toughness play.
He's paying for it, too. You can kind of see him grimacing as he comes back.
Oh.
That's quite a collision.
Luke Smith's giving up 40 pounds to Mike Adewumi there.
And the jet force propulsion going into him as well. It's not a good mismatch, or not a match that Belmont wants to see, but talk about just toughness and taking the charge.
Jet force propulsion. You're the best.
Well, not quite the engineering guy, but a few folks that go to that.
By the way, you brought
what
up,
would you call that, a collision?
I don't know. I called it a charge, I think. I don't know. You have to,
it was called a charge.
You have to rewind the tape. I don't know what I said. Belmont, once again this year, one of the best offenses in the conference. Second overall in scoring offense. First in conference games. They can score 80 with ease. And there's a jet force propulsion, as you would call it. That's another offensive foul, and Adewumi gets it back.
Take a look at this. Just outside the restricted area. That is a very fine defensive play.
Also in the game for Belmont, number 11, Michael Shanks.
First time Shanks this evening. So Brian Baroni, you can just see him in your screen. He's like, all right, how do we make those defensive adjustments now that we see Shanks in? And he's very happy to see Hollander leave the game without a doubt.
Hollander exits 7 of 12 shooting. He's got 17 points to lead all scorers in this game. And Shanks right into the game. 2 seconds played, 1 foul. Well, really, you think about it, every single player with Shanks in the game, every single player has mattered this year because of what we told you in the first half. Half the games Belmont has been without at least one starter. Whether it's been injuries, they had COVID early on, and they had 6 or 7 players that they went out to the East Coast with to start the season. As James knocks down a mid-range shot, trying to keep the Cougars close here.
Well, you could have drawn that. It'd be better if you're SIUE to get that at the buzzer. But back to the Belmont point. Still managed to go 18-0 in this conference, 18-2 to finish. And again, don't worry about that swing last week into Eastern and Moorhead, because we're going to see both of those teams tomorrow night, Connor. And they're two outstanding teams. Actually, we'll see Moorhead in a few hours. Eastern Kentucky tomorrow night. And those are two outstanding teams. And if you ever had a thought that this tournament was not wide open, when we get to that point, when we bring those two Kentucky teams into the mix, it's going to be very interesting.
Bob, that was a great point. That was also a great block during that point from Lamar Wright.
We build on success and the success of others. But we are more than sports. We are institutions that play a special role. We are a community that cares, supporting one another beyond the field of competition. Now and always, we are all together. We are all the Ohio Valley Conference.
You don't become a legend by being distracted. Legends are born out of discipline and focus. We are Legends Bank. Committed, strong, and growing stronger. Be part of something legendary. Legends Bank. Member FDIC.
It was just a few drinks. I'm good. I thought it was good.
After every game, we always have a few. It's no big deal. It was no big deal.
Hey, I can hold my liquor. I thought I could hold my liquor.
Back in Evansville, top seed Belmont up 13 on SIUE. And coming up later tonight, you'll see the freshman of the year. You'll see the coach of the year. It'll be Moorhead State and SEMO in game 2 in our second quarterfinal. Terry Taylor and Austin Peay play tomorrow. They get Eastern Kentucky. The Govs and the Colonels will play in the 3-6 game. It'll be Murray State and JSU in the 4-5 tomorrow night. Well, SIUE was down 17. They scored 4 in a row before the timeout and are getting it back here. Adewumi and Wright are the leading scorers. Lamar Wright for SIUE both have 10 for the shorthanded Cougars, and into Lamar Wright for his 12th points of the night.
It's a nice pass, entry pass by Adewumi on the right hip, but he just took it right up over Evan Bronze. You do not see that too frequently, particularly the inside game from SIUE.
So only 7 have played tonight for the Cougars, but all 7 have scored. So you talked about some of the even distribution they've had. They've had that again. They just kind of need that guy to take over the game, and that's probably going to have to be Adewumi.
They do, and I agree with that. I agree with that assertion. And then that's also a thought if you're Brian Baroni when you go and recruit, right? You've got a good mixture of this team. You're going to lose your leader So you got to find that. And I think James, despite that miss right there, to me it's been a surprise tonight as to how well he's played, because he did not have those great of an outing in the first 2 games against Belmont this season.
Yeah, James, he had 12, a tough earned 12 in the first meeting and held down to 7 in the second one. Both were big Belmont wins. Belmont won the first game by 52 and won the second game by 42. SIUE has it within 11 in the second half of our first quarterfinal. Adewumi with the spin. No finish, though. Here comes Murphy, 94 feet, Grayson Murphy.
You got to have some defense in the low block, and got to have the want to come over and take that charge like we've seen Murphy do. And the 6 points here by Murphy in the second half, and this is turning into the type of opportunity that SIUE just got then. You've got to capitalize on. Otherwise, you still continue to try and run the clock and shorten this game. I know I sound like a broken record, but the numbers you just read just kind of speak to that, Connor.
Well, that basket that they just got, that's usually the reverse of what we're used to seeing. Courtney Carter with the basket, Adewumi with the pass. It's Adewumi the top scorer. Carter's usually the one dishing it out. There is Carter dishing back into Wright. And the son of the late Lorenzen Wright coming on here in the second half.
This is a interesting game at this point, in that SIUE seems to have found another gear with some more energy, but the personnel is different on the floor, and it's Wright that's supplying the energy right now.
I thought you were going for the pun there. There's Evan Braun saying the personality is right. Well, yeah, you got two shots.
Actually,
to get
yeah,
it right.
It is. And Evan Braun's has got the right personality to play the low post, too. I can tell you that. It just went right back down and got the defender on his right hip.
Oh, that nearly went in for James. That was the toughest look he had at that runner that he's knocked down a couple times tonight. Pearson in and out in the 3, and Lamar Wright is there to snatch the rebound.
Boy, another lost defensive assignment then for SIUE, not coming out and challenging the shooter. And there's a quick hop step over the line to avoid the 10 count.
Yeah. Brian Baroni was over there jumping rope, stomping his foot, making sure Carter got it over, and then Carter turned it over and ran into the stanchion. So numbers here for Belmont, and Murphy gets it pounded up against the glass, but Braun's there to follow, and he gets bumped.
That was quite a flurry. In fact, in a couple of situations at this end of the floor, it was throw the ball up on the rim. If you're SIUE, go get it. I don't think they're going to win that battle a lot with Belmont.
When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the
Head coach Brian Baroni and SIUE trying to hang in with the top seed. They're within 11 right now with just outside 11 minutes to go. Second year, still building. We told you earlier, the son of an NBA coach and Power 5 coach and Tony. And, talking to him earlier today, he said, we want to play about 58 minutes of zone tonight. I mean, that would mean that the game has gone on a while. But, they've got that down. They've played a lot of zone. But you got to think the last month where they've played like 18 games in 36 days, that legs would be a factor here down the final 11 minutes.
It seemed like at some points in time I would look at the OVC schedule and see a 2 o'clock Monday game, a 2 o'clock Wednesday game, and that's part of that schedule that you talked about. But Brian Baroni has done an outstanding job of changing the culture a bit. That's one of the things I really think we need to emphasize a lot about Brian Baroni, bringing that kind of basketball-first mentality to some point in time. As you well know, the enrollment, even pre-pandemic, continued to grow at SIUE, so it continues to be a viable entity. Plus, I've always thought this because I'm a guy from the South, so I've always been told this, but hey, if you're near St. Louis, you should be able to recruit St. Louis, right? And I think he's got to do that going forward. But he's got all of the connections. He's got all the DNA, as we've talked about time and time again. And I'm pretty confident he's going to get a good job done there at SIUE.
Well, you saw some of the big names he's been around, not just, of course, his dad when he played for him, and his dad spent time as a coach in the NBA, but on Tom Crean's staff at one time. He's good friends with Steve Forbes, who's the head coach at Wake Forest. And he tapped into that friendship with Steve Forbes a little bit. At Wake, they had, a 33-day pause. So those two friends were able to chat and kind of strategize together on how to handle it.
It's amazing some of the stories, even today, Connor, that I've heard about how these athletes have been tested, some of the requirements that are a part of this greater tournament as well. It's just amazing. So, yeah, sharing those stories because – as a lot of our colleagues and I and you have talked about, there's no playbook for what we've been through this season of college basketball.
Nope, but here we are on schedule to crown a champion this week. This is our first quarterfinal. 4 to come. And Adewumi gets fouled. He took it in on Shepard.
Finally, SIUE gets to the free throw line. That's a spot they have not been a lot tonight. And again, if you're going to catch up, you're going to create. You could do so with the clock stopped. Only the 5th opportunity tonight from the free throw line. Both teams have been perfect there.
Well, remember the first 2 possessions of the game, Shamar Wright got to the free throw line. And SIUE was able to build up an early lead in the first 8 minutes. They've only been one since.
Yeah, memo to SIUE, 10 is on the floor. He's in the low block.
If you had the
potentially to shoot, yeah.
If you had the telestrator, put the circle on him.
I should. It's got the attention of the SIUE staff.
Oh, look at that pass from Murphy. No look down to Derek Saban, and he'll have shots.
As Saban was a guy that played very well early on, and then has kind of got into a lesser mix of being inside of this rotation. Well, it's hard to beat a pass like that.
And Grayson Murphy, he's the 5th leading scorer. He's one of 5 guys that Belmont has in double figures. But because of his passing, because of his defense, because he's one of the best rebounding guards in the country at 8 rebounds a game, Casey Alexander said it's pretty simple. 5th most points on our team, but he's our MVP.
For all the things that he does that are so much greater than the classic box score. I mean, besides that, he's just a leader. He's a leader by example. He's not a vocal kid. You can't hear him in these empty arenas. It's just how he plays consistently game over game. And you just kind of marvel at.
If there was anybody that missed Nick Muszynski, it had to be Grayson Murphy the most. I mean, he maybe putting a little pressure on himself, according to his head coach. Still had good numbers, but he certainly missed his big fella down lows. There's Isaiah James. He's carved out some points in the mid-range tonight.
Well, the defense, in a rare situation for Belmont, has kind of left him in the same manner we've seen out of SIUE. That looks like that's basket interference.
No basket.
Well, both benches are, I think, yelling across the way, maybe yelling at the refs.
Whose hand is in the cylinder?
Well, Adewumi. Yeah, SIUE was saying that's offensive goaltending. And that's eventually what they ruled. SIUE is getting it back, but Belmont wanted the slap back on the glass against Adewumi to be defensive goaltending.
I think that was in the act of making the block.
Yeah, they
if
called
anything,
basket interference there.
Yeah, if anything, I think the ball was still on the rim when Saban tapped it through.
Well, anyway, SIUE will take it. They can cut this thing inside single figures now. Saban guarding right in the post. Little head fake, and he got fouled. And if that went down, he could have made this a 9-point game.
Yeah, and I don't mean to micromanage, but that's a big miss in that situation. Because not only is it potentially 3 points, it's the momentum of it, Connor, and that's exactly what SIUE needs to get them through this final 9 minutes, because we know they're gassed.
Yeah, Lamar Wright, despite all the injuries and playing 7 guys or 8 guys in the rotation on most nights, he's looked fresh down the stretch here. Last 2 games were his best 2 of the season. Had 10 against SEMO, and then had 16 point, 10 rebound, double-double against UT Martin.
He looks like a basketball player. I know that's kind of an overstatement.
I wonder why.
But he just, yeah, talk about DNA, right? But at this point in time of the season, if you have that kind of spring in your step and you're able to create things that may not be there inside of what you're trying to accomplish in your offensive sets and just kind of do the extraordinary, it's a big plus.
Well, it was Wright that had the block on Muszynski, and Muszynski's wondering, how's that off him? And they do reverse the call. So it'll be Belmont ball.
It's just one of those old State Farm, you make the calls, right? Let's see. It's like it was the correct one.
Oh, right back into Muszynski. And just his second field goal tonight, coming back from missing 2 games with the ankle injury.
So we clocked it earlier. It was 14 minutes elapsed for Moose tonight. It's like he might be in the range of where you and I predicted.
Hey, you lowballed me, by the way. I said about, 18 minutes, and you said 15 to 18?
It's called covering.
Oh, Adewumi with a deep jumper. That's a 3. And look at this. SIUE was blown out by 40 and then 50 in the 2 games in the regular season against Belmont. It's a 10-point game with 8 to go.
I just wonder how much they have in the tank.
Smith off on the 3. Rebound for SIUE with Courtney Carter. This could get really interesting with a basket here.
It's a great play by Carter to keep it alive and find a teammate.
Good matchup here. It's Wright going in on Muszynski, and that's a block on the big man for Belmont.
And Muszynski may have an argument here. Wright wrapped his arm around him to gain the advantage.
Reigning champs being tested a little bit. 10-point game with 7.5 to go.
Your top salesman is working from home while working to close a deal. What does Uncle Larry decided to stop by 2 weeks ago? This looks like a job for Smile Power. Good thing your employees have dental insurance backed nationally by over 65 years of molar defending experience. So their healthy deal closers are always ready to close. Unleash your smile power with Delta Dental of Tennessee. Talk to your employer or visit coveryourmouth.com today to learn more.
Visit Evansville, Indiana, where E is for everyone. Ideal for a weekend getaway, family reunion, group tour, concert or sporting event, small business meeting, or a large convention. Evansville has a fun, friendly environment with all the amenities of a big city. Exciting events, festivals, and attractions all year long. A thriving downtown with new hotels, nightlife, fabulous restaurants, and entertainment. We're conveniently located in the heart of the Midwest with all the charm you could ever hope for. Yes, Hoosier hospitality is alive and well. Come visit Evansville and you will see E is for everyone.
Hello, I'm Chad Miles, host of Kentucky Afield, the longest running outdoor show in the nation. I've had the privilege of watching Kentucky's elk herd grow to the largest east of the Mississippi, attaining Boone and Crockett status, and I've shared in some amazing elk hunts along the way. This year, nearly 600 tags are available to the public, and you can take your pick of tags to put in for and possibly go on the hunt of a lifetime. Simply apply by April 30th for your chance to hunt elk right here in Kentucky.
10-point game. Belmont being tested late here in quarterfinal number 1 in the OVC tournament. And Nick Muszynski in his return tonight. And this play, Bob, was, in your mind, questionable. He got called for a foul.
Take a look at right with the left hand. And then Muszynski gets his feet tied up at the bottom. So what do you see as you're an official along that baseline?
I saw maybe a hook, but also a little bit of a bump with the hip, too, from Muszynski.
And that's a big hip, I might add. They'll call him Moose for nothing.
It is. That is a hip that's halfway to being 6'11". So Wright missed the free throw. And Belmont is saying ball don't lie after Muszynski thought that the foul called against him was not. Remains a 10-point game, and that's a kick ball by Polk.
Again, I'm very impressed with the overplaying of the defensive lanes, even this late in a game by SIUE. You know, we talked about it time and time again. They looked gassed 3/4 of the way through the first half. Kind of caught a little bit of energy at halftime, and they continue to play very strong defense. Again, slapping the ball off the backboard. And that just shows they're just getting there late, too, Connor.
Well, yeah, that's definitely a goaltend.
I'm okay with that one. We don't even need to review that one. That's pretty
it's
pretty close.
Counted for 2 for Grayson Murphy. He's up to 13 points. He did it mostly with his passing in the 2 regular season meetings against SIUE. Murphy had 12 assists in one of the games against the Cougars in the regular season. He's got the on-ball defense, clock winding down, and through the hands of Lamar Wright. And here come the Bruins running, and a block from behind by Adewumi. He met Shepard up top.
Shepard was just coasting a bit, thinking he had an easy dunk there. And then out of nowhere, the defense by number 1.
That's twice tonight. We've seen a chase down block for Adewumi.
That's his third, team's 8.
Still, with the defensive pressure is SIUE, and we still got a game here.
At the line for the Cougars, Lamar Wright for 1 and the bonus.
He's got a career high in blocks with the 3. He's got a career high in steals with 3. And it's Adewumi, saving it for SIUE again. He came from the weak side there and knocked it out. Cougars ball on the baseline.
Right off the leg.
Ben Shepard, these last 2 possessions, has seen just about enough of Adewumi.
Both ends of the floor.
We get this matchup again here, and this time Shepard gets him. It was help from Murphy that forced the turnover.
Well, he come back and redeemed himself. Did Shepard on the defensive end. That's no tall or small task tonight. Guarding Adewume.
Well, that's one of the changes for Grayson Murphy this year, right? Less steals. He's off the ball a little bit more with Luke Smith, a little bit smaller of a player in there. And you've got a foul on Wright trying to fend off the big man down low, Nick Muszynski.
That is his second, team 7.
Great look underneath, and that one will easily go on Wright, and Muszynski does not need to plead his case much more. One of the best free throw shooters in the league, right here at the line.
74%. We were talking about maybe, being careful with the minutes tonight if Belmont was able to coast out and win this game big, but Muszynski's playing late. SIUE had it down to 10 a couple possessions ago.
Well, I'm no doctor, and nor do I try to play one on TV, but what I do know is I'm very impressed that the Belmont staff, the athletic training staff, bought Muszynski out here after sitting through halftime, and at the advantage that they had at that point in time, you're kind of thinking that was not going to happen.
That got away from Jacoby Wood. They'll reset it back down the other way.
And instead they bring him out, get him some quality minutes here in the second half as they try and extend this 13-point lead. So, and the margin of victory, should it come out that way for Belmont tonight? That won't be a question. Two of the emerging storylines are Grayson Murphy doesn't have a double-double yet, and Muszynski has played quite a bit, more so than he has in the last 10 days.
Well, SIUE's still hanging in there, Bob.
They sure are.
And Lamar Wright has been a presence in the second half. He's out to set the screen. But the defensive player of the year is guarding Courtney Carter, and the shot left short. When you think about the line tonight for Muszynski, just 5 points in his return. SIUE is the only team that held him under 10 earlier in the year, and Jacoby Wood makes it a 16-point game for Belmont.
That might be the one that really puts it out of reach for SIUE at this point.
Brian Baroni probably in agreement with that, too. He takes a timeout for SIUE, and Jacoby Wood, Mr. Basketball, the former star at Cleveland High School in Tennessee, makes it a 16-point game.
You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and when we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and...
Cougars had it close, but Belmont has pulled away up 16 with 5 to go.
And you're not seeing double. These are first half highlights. And the three-point shot was in well effect then. And then just moments ago, this run out and it's kind of had the makings of SIUE kind of being gassed defensively at that point in time. No help in the middle, and Caleb Hollander probably done for the night with 17. He was outstanding early on. Adewume, 15 for SIUE, and the assist numbers are pretty much to trend as Belmont almost 2-1 with their opponents all season long.
Well, Hollander had 14 of those 17 in the first half. Adewume just as strong in the second half as he was in the first. He had 8 at the break. Luke Smith had the swipe, and he goes coast to coast with the lay-in.
Outstanding, reversing with the left hand, using the rim as a defender and going up and under the SIUE defender for the bucket.
That's the crazy thing. Belmont has the defensive player of the year 2 times running with Grayson Murphy. He doesn't lead them in steals. You got 2 guards that start for you in Luke Smith and Grayson Murphy that are tremendous defenders, and it's the non-defensive player of the year leading you in steals.
Well, dare I say, after that shot by Jacoby Wood, dare I say it's the little things that Murphy does that go kind of unnoticed. Oh, yeah. The classic doesn't show up in the box score. And right. Steals is, that's a great category to have, but that doesn't necessarily qualify you as defensive player of the year. Now take a look at Wood right here as we go to break. Very impressive on the run out.
Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and you can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... When we say crispy, juicy, tender, this is the juicy and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the... You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the... Just when you thought it couldn't get any better than crispy, juicy, and tender, we went and... You can tell this is really crispy, juicy, and tender because we wouldn't take the...
This is the best of the best!
Final 4 minutes of our first quarterfinal. One more to come tonight. We hope you stay up late with us. It's the 2-7 game. Morehead State, they got the best defense in the conference. They got the coach of the year, the freshman of the year, and SEMO, one of the up-and-coming teams with Brad Korn taking over this year, and they're ready to go. They were jumping rope down that tunnel. They're waiting to get out here in a couple of minutes and take on the Eagles.
Morehead State went through their testing protocols this morning at about 7:30. I watched them leave the plaza where that's conducted. Imagine how long ago that was.
So Lamar Wright at the free throw line out of the timeout for SIUE. And he's had a great second half here, Bob. Lamar Wright is up to 10 points now, 9 points.
Just a different basketball team than Belmont has manhandled twice this season, and it's great part effort, part scheme, and I just really like the way that they have played tonight, except for a couple defensive lapses where they just really have to come out, or perhaps they were in the wrong defense at that point in time. Quickly changed out of that, and Belmont's had to earn quite a bit tonight, save a couple of runouts and a couple of dunks by Muzinski and Hollander.
Hey, you bring up Muzinski. What'd you think tonight? I mean, he's coming back, a couple games out, ankle injury. You know, not huge numbers from him, but what'd you think?
I think it's a perfect scenario for Belmont to get him the minutes, not necessarily test drive the ankle, but to gauge exactly how much they think they could push him. And this game afforded them that opportunity. So I say mission accomplished on the part of Belmont tonight as it relates to Muzinski.
I remember Belmont, last 2 games of the year, they lost. Without Nick Muzinski, they were, a one-loss team without him. No losses in the conference, 18-0. The one loss came December 5th at to Samford. They won 21 straight, then he gets hurt, and they lose 2 straight coming into the year or into the tournament. But they look like they're rolling on to their second game into the semifinals tonight.
Well, we get to see Morehead State here in a few minutes, and that's one of the teams that beat Belmont, the last team to beat them, rather. And then before that, that was an overtime game. They lost to Morehead State by Belmont. The game before that, the Eastern Kentucky game, that was a plus 14 win for Eastern Kentucky, and I think that began to raise a lot of eyebrows. And that ankle, folks, has been the discussion in Evansville the first week in March for the past 3 years.
You think about the semifinal 2 years ago against Austin Peay, and he goes out in the semi the next night. Great game. We had, 10,500 in here. It was a sellout, and it was Dylan Windler versus John Morant. Muzinski couldn't suit up that night. And it's kind of the what if for Belmont fans. What if he played in that game?
Yeah, that's always going to be a great what if. In fact, a bit of history. I was down in that end zone when he injured that ankle that night, and you could just see the frustration and the fear that came over the big guys, and just wailing in pain as he was helped off the floor. I'll never forget that.
It was amazing toughness for him, too, because he came back. Remember, they played Temple and Maryland in the NCAA tournament. They got in at large that year, and he suited up. He played in both games. 6 to shoot here for Luke Smith, and couldn't fit it into bronze. James got Shepard to go by.
Basket by Isaiah James.
Just can't say enough about James tonight. Been the outside shot a couple times, and this time he commits the foul, just kind of overplaying defensively.
Well, Brian Baroni has said, sometimes James will be standing out there on the court. He'll make a great pass, and he'll turn around to Brian Baroni and say, "Coach, I'm sorry I didn't shoot it." And Brian Baroni will say, "Yeah, you should have shot it. You're a 40% shooter from 3. Why aren't you shooting more?" But Baroni's really high on Isaiah James. Called him the loudest guy in any room that you go into. Just a super fun personality.
He's been special tonight.
Well, we'll see. We'll see who comes back. This is kind of a redshirt year for everybody. He is a senior. James out of Chesapeake, Virginia, by way of Indian Hills Community College to the Cougars program. See if Adewumi comes back too. He's a senior, and he lines up a deep 3. Caught the heel, and that's out to Belmont. Is right. Tried to keep it alive.
It's a great point when you look at rosters, when you prepare for games like you and I do, and you do indeed have that thought, Connor, and that's in the back of your mind is, it's a senior, but possibly could come back. And that's all across the nation. It's not just you and I tonight here in Evansville. And a lot of financial implications with that, a lot of coaching moves and implications with that, a lot of team implications with that. Yeah, it's a huge issue. But the important thing, I think, for this game and for this league and for most everyone, how about that? Hollander with a shot blocked and another shot blocked.
Man, Lamar Wright staying with the play twice in a row.
This is how you jump late in the game and you're down 15 plus and you're playing that hard. That's coaching, Connor. I just really genuinely feel that. And these kids have not quit on Brian Baroni, and, you know, again, doing those comparative scores for the first 2 times these 2 teams met and to see tonight's effort,
well, how
big
cool,
difference.
How cool is it to see the Wright brothers, they're twins, the Lamar and Shamar, playing for a Baroni. So Isaiah James hits the shot. But Lamar Wright, Shamar Wright, the son of the late Lorenzen Wright, who tragically passed in 2010, Brian Baroni's father, Tony, coached in the NBA, as we told you before. Their dad played for Brian Baroni's dad, and now you get the next generation coming together. That is really special.
Now, there's so many storylines that develop when you start looking at the Baroni family, with all due respect. You know, I first met him to play the name game. I first met him 3 years ago when he was an assistant at SIUE because of Ray Giacoletti, who's now was working with me in this role and is now an assistant to Travis Ford at Kentucky, or rather at St. Louis, who played at Kentucky and has Kentucky roots nearby where I live, which also has ties and roots to Charles Bubba Wells, the assistant coach at SIUE that Baroni retained. Need I go on and on? It's an unbelievable network.
Did your wife respond to your Bubba Wells pick, by the way?
Well, she did. She did and said, quote, tell him hi. And I said, well, actually, I'm in Tier 3 and he's in Tier 1, so I will wave at Bubba. No, yeah.
Does Bubba know you took the picture and sent it to your wife?
I probably need to let him know. But that's that goes without saying. It's in public domain, okay, so I think we're okay. You know, Bubba Wells, a great Austin Peay player, a Hall of Famer, just had his all-time scoring record eclipsed by a guy we're going to see tomorrow night in Terry Taylor.
Player of the Year 2 years running, Terry Taylor. And Coach Figger and the Govs will play here tomorrow in the 3-6 game.
We're going to see Preston Spradlin in a few minutes. Preston Spradlin, on his staff is Scott Combs, who has ties to Clarksville, Tennessee, and played with Brian Ayers, who's an assistant coach at Belmont. So there's just so many ties in this league. And that's part of recruiting too, Connor. You know, that's networking, that's recruiting. Scott Combs, who we'll see in a few minutes, is head coach at Martin Methodist College in Tennessee. Before he left, he played for Dave Luce at Austin Peay. He left to be on Preston Spradlin's team, and I think Isaiah James ought to come back for his 5th senior season.
We're going to have you spin the web of the family tree.
Well, I'm going to get the genealogy. I'm going to get the chart out. Who needs that? What is that?
23andMe.
Yeah, that's it. Who needs that? I mean, it's just incredible.
Well,
when you get into this level and you've been blessed like I've been to be a part of this league for a long time. There's so many connections. There's a good look right there at Brian Ayers behind Casey Alexander.
Bobby's bracket. That's what get with graphics. You got about a half hour between games. Spin a little web.
I think I need to try and find some more food. There's Brian right there. Longtime assistant. Thought to get the job when Rick Barnes retired. Instead, it was Casey Alexander, and what's the first move? Casey Alexander, Rick Bird. I'm sorry, I got my Barnes and Birds mixed up.
You went to Knoxville.
I went a little too far east. Now, Rick Bird is a UT graduate, though. I will tell you that. So, his father was a longtime columnist in Nashville for the newspaper. That guy there has been everything that we advertised in the Open.
Adewumi you're talking about.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Been outstanding tonight.
Adewumi. We talked about it with James being a senior. Adewumi, you would think that Coach Baroni would do everything that he could to get him back next year. He thought that he thought Adewumi was snubbed. This was nothing to take away from the all-league players, but he thought Adewumi belonged on that list, and it felt like Adewumi was a snub. Polk gets up a 3. And Belmont's there to clear the glass with Bellinger. And SIUE will foul. And a 15-point game.
Excuse me. He's played tonight like he belongs in that list.
Well, this looks like we can safely say that this will be the end of the road for SIUE. 15-point game, under a half minute to go. So SIUE, they've consistently been here. They've been the 8th seed now 3 years in a row. Had a chance on the final day of the regular season if they had beaten SEMO to be the 7th seed, and they'll be looking to move up, have some more favorable seeding next year. A year, Bob, in which we expect the bracket to go back to normal. It'll come down to a coach's vote, but this year at the pandemic season and being unsure of whether or not all the games would get in, made the adjustment and went straight 1 through 8. Usually 1 and 2 are on to the semifinals.
It's a great shot there with Brian Baroni and Isaiah James. That's an outstanding shot, and just kind of capture the emotion of it. As a senior, and again, road unknown. Yeah, to your point, hey, would you like to be in the room when these coaches decide the double bye first round, or they get into that discussion?
Yeah, would be fascinating. You're right, great shot of James and Coach Baroni. It ends here for SIUE as Casey Allen